I'd love to introduce you to my co-founder at Every, John Wants, to talk about tokenization of humans.
Thank you. Such a creepy intro, isn't it? Totally. It's going to get creepier. So that little thing. So I'm John. Just a quick background. Jonathan and I grew up together. If you look really hard, you might find me. Jonathan's that kid in the red sweatshirt that looks really scary and mean. I'm just kidding. We met like 5 years ago. That's not him. But you all thought it was, right? So my background, most of my career has been spent in kind of two sectors. I've been really lucky in whether working with brands or inside of agencies servicing brands to always live inside of very innovative, in a very innovative capacity, like product development, product innovation, and then had an opportunity to move into retail. And across that timeline, managing against a lot of different stakeholders. So whether it be investors, it be public markets, it be brand leadership. There's been I've been a lucky SOB to be on the cutting edge of understanding, adopting, and figuring out how to use emerging technology and move it into marketing, move it into consumer experiences, into environments where we can understand it. So just real quick, just to level set, Jonathan, like the goal was to kind of pitch at like the 200 level. Like Peter Vicentes is like a Rhodes Scholar. So I'm like on my second year of community college as it pertains to blockchain and tokenization. So that's where we're gonna go. So we've been dealing with, so we're focused on retail. And so we've been thinking about the retail sector and really any network that has humans operating inside of it. So like Airbnb on the blockchain, Craigslist on the blockchain. There's a lot of tokenized networks where it requires humans to participate. And so traditional model, there's a centralizing authority that gets to sit in the middle, in Airbnb, a Facebook, a Google, consume all value and manage supply and demand on both sides. Sometimes that's great, and sometimes that ends up hurting the economics and the participation of those network members. So we're all here because we believe in decentralization. And what that looks like is whether it's a token project or maybe a blockchain, behind the scenes facilitating things. We've been moving into this era of decentralization, and I wanted to kind of take a moment to question this and talk about this because while the idea of tokenizing a network, and for us, we're not a security token. We also don't really position ourselves in a utility token. We're more of a store of value token, and the value that we store, as Danny mentioned from the team earlier, is that consumer data. So in our network, we want to move consumer data back and forth between brands and shoppers. And I've found myself philosophically thinking through this journey and in this project, are we really creating a decentralized ecosystem, specifically on the token level? So technically, everything's running on decentralized ledgers. Our corporate model, we're a co-op, so we've done a lot of things to decentralize the institution and decentralize our efforts. But I find myself when it comes to the token that's facilitating all the value exchanges, is it really decentralized? So typically on a token project today, you have about 30 to 40% of tokens going out to investors from the onset. Okay, 10, 15% gets held back for team, and then let's just say the rest gets put into treasury. And what does that mean? Who gets to spend that to drive what motivations and what value? And I find myself thinking, the idea is to decentralize and allow for the people who sit inside of a tokenized network to see the upside, to be part of the value, to be part of that environment. And I'm not really seeing token projects developing tokenomics that actually allow for that to happen. So you may have more security over your data. You may have an opportunity to have a bigger voice, or maybe you're part of governance on a project, but these tokens are being introduced as an asset by the project, a lot of the time by a company that's also owned by shareholders, whether it's a public company like the last panel, or it's a company that's raised traditional capital that has a fiduciary responsibility to create an exit for those investors who have equity. So there's a lot of conflict when you start thinking about, are these token projects really decentralized? So and this is kind of this is happening across all these sectors. And so wallets might be a solution, right? So if like Life ID or our wallet or Civic if these wallets start to step up and be able to let shoppers or just consumers move kind of between these projects, that might help with adoption. That might help with some of the motivation and some of the upside. But then you have a whole other layer of tokenizing that's occurring at the wallet level, and it's going to be there's economic benefit for the wallets to then centralize inside of their ecosystem as well. So what I wanted to jump into and talk about in the last 6.5 minutes is what would it look like if all of the participants inside of these decentralized networks were able to bring their own asset to the game. So what would it look like if every one of us had our own digital currency, our own token, and our level of participation, our information, our impact, our influence, our race, our wealth, all of this information that could benefit the networks that want to participate with us, they can maybe operate a little bit more like a platform token and allow for interoperability between our value. So we got a gal on the team, Audrey. I don't know if she's here yet. She's got a PhD out of Columbia, and we argue a lot. And one of the things we argue about is how do we think about the taxonomy of human data? How do we think about developing value assessments against that? And for us, we think the box that we get to operate in is pretty crisp and clear. So retail, so there's defined, socio-demographic information about people and humans that really map to the demand that like brand and manufacturers want. So we get to use some of that existing defined information that Facebook and Google have used to target us for ads and turn that into the data that we can turn into value. But this is a slippery slope. We've been spending 6 months thinking about how do we, for us, it would be tokenizing both sides of supply and demand, both brands and shoppers, and letting each one of those constituents have their own representation of value. But how do we think about this? Because typical token projects, I don't know what typical really is, but like for our platform token, I think we're on like an 8 to 10 year liquidity strategy. So from a treasury standpoint, we're going to release to incentivize the right interactions in our network over the next 8 to 10 years. And that's just to kind of create our flywheel to grow velocity inside of our network. And as Danny mentioned, to steward the token value and make sure that we're serving the goals of our constituents. But none of that actually creates economic upside for the individuals in our network. And so if we could develop a second class, or like kind of how we refer to it internally, is like an altcoin to our coin, where every single member and every single participant had their own stake. And what would that look like? So for brands, that model gets pretty simple because that value of that token can, that's going to probably be reflective of, how dope your clothes are and how many people want to buy your stuff. Like those models are pretty straightforward. The value of that token can go towards marketing or customer acquisition, or potentially we carve some out from treasury for a brand to help them with manufacturing to support demand. Those models are pretty table stake. But when we think about the humans, there's some pretty interesting opportunities. So I'm a big libertarian. And when I first started reading the cypherpunk stuff, I was like, I found my cult, to use Peter's term earlier. It's like, this just made sense. And this, I got this kind of bad feeling when I started understanding these decentralized networks are actually there's some core group of constituents that are centralizing value. And so that's why we wanted to push further into decentralizing all the economic upside. So there's some fun principles. There's some fun things to think about. So universal income. So if Audrey's data, she's a lot younger than me, so if Audrey's data has an opportunity to kind of grow in value and compound over time, and our use case like retail or other use cases where humans actually participate in the network will actually start to adopt and use her token has an opportunity to grow in value. So we're a co-op, and so our job and like our fiduciary liability is to the economic upside of our members, and our members are brands and shoppers. So from a custodial standpoint, I can help Audrey like slowly liquidate and participate in the value and the growth and upside of her personal token. And there's kind of a peak in retail where a certain demographic of a user, they're worth more. It's kind of a woman between like 35 to 51. Kids are kind of going out of the house, but her earnings increase. It's like this kind of the Pottery Barn window. And there's an opportunity, while there's fluctuations in value of an individual's token, to be able to take some of that off the table. And think about like a Kylie Jenner. Think about these influencers. Think about all these people who are bringing value to networks. That value probably won't last. Like, I don't know, we'll see the Kardashians are just unstoppable, but all the other influencers, right? There's this wave of value that we represent to the networks that we participate in. And if we can help kind of normalize some of that value and allow for a human to be able to sustain and grow that value, I think retail is just the go-to-market for this. Healthcare, insurance, government considerations, and there's a big. I just think it's a big opportunity. So we have about 265 brands right now that we're working on developing the models and theories and how do we approach them with this. And for us, it's simple on the brand side again because it's points, it's currency backed, it's an asset packed points. Humans, this is definitely a next year thing, late next year thing where we start to think about this. Because it's going to be more of a, we develop a lot of monetary policies for our regulatory position, and for us, when it comes to human, we're developing like a human policy. How do we think about how to democratically, as a co-op, steward the value of the individuals that represent all of the upside that's been created in technology holistically? So yes, it's like Black Mirror. Yes, it's like Chinese social credit system. There's a lot of shit to work out. But at the end of the day, the driver and the thesis in this is, can we create economic personal benefit to drive human adoption of decentralized networks? So that, as Peter was kind of saying earlier, he's a little bit of my idol. I'm gonna mention him one more time, maybe. Maybe we have an opportunity to really decentralize those networks and reduce the mandate that they have to involve external constituents early that extract and centralize value in those networks, i.e. investors, and allow for a crowd and the value the crowd directly represents to fund those decentralized platforms. So I'll leave it there.
So I was going to ask, for the audience to ask him a question, but we're running low on time. So what's the quick question that you want to leave to the audience while we transition?
I already got this ready. What's your token value? So what do you do today? So I think Facebook, I forget, Danny, do you remember how much Facebook makes off of each one of us every year? 20, so is it over 100? So, take a moment. Just take a moment and think about all the information, all the value, all the time that you give to these platforms, and just take a moment, maybe pick the top 2 platforms and go look at the market cap of those platforms.
Thank you.
Okay, there you go.
All right, thanks, John.